Okay, well, I'll just jump into it. This is a really interesting time for us as far as kind of GIS and sustainable development goals are. We see the opportunity for these things to come together in a really interesting way. In many ways, maps provide a kind of universal language for us to begin to look at and address problems like the sustainable development goals and their key indicators. And there's two ideas behind this. First, the GIS community is building and often eager to share their data, the data sets they're building, their systems of record. Meanwhile, the sustainable development goals provide a kind of amazing approach, a set of really high-level objectives that people around the world, organizations around the world can get behind and all pull together on. And GIS provides a kind of integrating platform for looking at those. And the indicators for each global development goal provide an outline for what GIS users can do to help participate in the achievement of these global goals. Next slide. Next slide. So one of the things that we know is maps provide a universal language for common understanding. And there's some really interesting aspects to this. Every organization is creating and sharing their own information for their areas of interest. All these organizations, all GIS organizations around the world, have a core mission, their reason to exist, and in support of their mandate and their area of focus, they're building content. And they're heavily invested in creating those important information sets for their areas of interest. And what's very compelling about this is every organization's information fits onto the surface of the earth. Everybody's contributing by building their own GISs and addressing their own problems. These can be used for both visual display and use as well as spatial analysis. Next slide. And what's interesting is every day these organizations, and there are hundreds of thousands of organizations around the world, billions of people are building and compiling their geographic data layers about topics that are critical to their own work and for their areas of interest. And the scope of information covers everything we're working on, including every aspect of these global goals. And that data is being compiled from rooms in a building all the way to parcels of land, to infrastructure for neighborhoods, for local communities, regions, states, nations, up to the planet levels, and even sometimes beyond into the solar system. And WebGIS is bringing all of this information to life in a kind of common framework. Just like Google brought information together with its Google search and discovery, GIS is starting to fill in information for the planet. And that notion of a network of organizations that provide that information is I think, a real strength and a real opportunity in the broad GIS community. Next slide. So if we extend that idea of geo-referencing this shared data onto the web, where every information set becomes a URL, just like all information on the web. Suddenly it's not just your own data in your organization that you're working with, but you also have this ability to tap into other information that's been shared about your geographic area of interest. And what we find fascinating these days is every organization can begin to index that data, discover it, bring it into their own information catalogs, into their portals, and then putting that information to work alongside their own information and integrated with their own information is actually a really incredible opportunity to address some of these really key objectives that I think everyone is getting aligned behind with the sustainable goals. And what's interesting about the way these different data sets are coming from multiple organizations is GIS makes it easy to integrate those and to work those. And in other words, everybody's assembling their own GIS from data that's coming from many organizations. Next slide. In other words, every one of our individual GISs are starting to become part of a bigger whole. And that should be W-H-O-L-E. So this concept of this shared GIS is really interesting. It's not just your own information, which is very valuable and really, you know, it's amazing how organizations have contributed that. It's this ability to access and tap into other information that provides real synergy for GIS users. In a way, it's useful to think about that as a shared GIS for the world. And it can serve as the basis for a number of comprehensive GIS applications. Like we are very excited about Sustainable Development Goals because it provides a set of objectives that many organizations can get aligned behind, and we can all work towards the same set of goals with the same indicators, building content in some common ways. So it's a real chance to leverage GIS to do good. Next slide. The result of all these agencies creating this data, in a way, organizations think about the data they create as their systems of record, you know, the foundational layers for the world, things like parcels, census geography, environmental layers, transportation, base maps, etc. All of that's being built and assembled. The world's getting filled in, and the pace of migrating these kinds of data into WebGIS is beginning to grow, and there's kind of an upward curve. It's growing exponentially, and we see many contributions coming online and just growing participation. There's 4 million plus users now in ArcGIS Online using information. They're creating billions of tile services every day, and it's really catching on. And this system of systems idea, where everybody's GIS is getting connected to each other and information is flowing between those, provides a really interesting opportunity. The GIS community is creating this really strong and vibrant network. Every day it's very dynamic and growing and changing. Next slide. And we think things like global development goals provide a real focus for how people apply GIS. If you think about each goal and the set of indicators for each goal, those really provide objectives for key information items in the system and key applications, and also critical audiences that can be served by the GIS that we're all building. And when we think about GIS and information, one of the other things we've started to really focus on as GIS has moved to the web is to understand and recognize that GIS is building on top of the original data sets. So all the data sets that are being built is really cool, but GIS goes beyond just those individual data sets. Next slide. One of the things that's in every GIS is a collection of really intelligent information items. So if you look in your portals, in your information catalogs, maps and scenes are starting to provide they're kind of payloads of information. So all the raw layers are being placed into context onto base maps with mashups. Those raw data sets have information pop-ups so that people can report and explore the data. Your map can be a window into really interesting analytical functions, and that set of rich, intelligent information items, things like maps and web scenes that are made up of intelligent layers with pop-ups and with analytics and tools that work with them, is really fascinating. Next slide. And one of the key ways these maps and scenes get used is very interesting. If you think now of an online map, an interactive map, you can think of every map as an app. In other words, people need intelligent information items to do their work. Apps become a way to deliver capabilities that are really focused to an individual or a group or a community of people that can all put that information to work. Your map becomes this intelligent information delivery mechanism. All the layers that you want to get access to, it's kind of a window into that information. If you want to reach into that map through your app and run some analytics because that's a function you need, you can do that. So this collection of intelligent apps is how the great work of GIS organizations can start to be delivered to people who can really put that information to work and to keep it going. So a lot of times we think about that information catalog as everybody's collection. We have one where we're starting to think about the idea of a living atlas for the planet, the collection of best available content that people can use. And we're just finding that is really catching on. Organizations are starting to deliver. And that brings us back around to the collective sustainable development goals. Next slide. And it's these 17 goals and their corresponding indicators that really are beginning to be used to define a set of information products. We're going to talk about some of those this morning. And the set of indicators for each of those goals provide a kind of outline or a plan of action for implementing GIS for sustainable development. And that's a vision that I think we're all very excited about, and I think it's actually achievable. I think the technology is there. I think the know-how for how to do it is there. I think you guys, by showing up, we're kind of overwhelmed by how many of you have tuned into this broadcast. We think it's a very interesting time. I think you know, the excitement about achieving this is real, and we're very excited about that. So let's get on with more details about the presentation. I'd like to introduce Charles Brigham. He's a member of our Sustainable Development team, and he's dedicated to working with you on your important work and achieving your mission. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. Welcome, everybody. Before we get into the more detailed information products, I just want to introduce some of the work that you guys are doing, but also start out with understanding the framework and process that you all are familiar with and play a part in. GIS is your profession, your technology, and really provides a framework and process for creating such a smarter world. And it brings together all of the data, integrating it and managing it. It brings it into an abstraction that people can understand, that can be easily visualized and inform the world. And you all do that in your regular work. Many of you do. And with the SDGs, we need to quit thinking in terms of limitations as to what a map is. A map becomes a platform for your conversations about sustainable development. And this ability to bring things into view that bring in your views, my views, your goals, and my goals. And as we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, to get a better idea of what our community is doing, we can look at the next set of slides to see a lot of examples from the GIS community and how it naturally supports the SDGs. Next slide. The purpose of these slides in the next set is to briefly illustrate your work and to show that our users are already working on the SDGs, that you all naturally work towards these goals and help everyone think about how we might convene to achieve goals within your organization. All of those are related in some way to the SDGs. So I would urge people to come back to this next set of slides to just look at the great work our users are doing. I'm going to go through those for the purpose of showing them. The work of the GIS community spans across all the goals. These SDGs have an effect on all of us. Next slide. Our health, livelihoods, and the GIS community is working towards improved health and well-being. Next slide. The SDGs educate us all. Through GIS, we can elevate the value of the SDGs, and through our applied GIS work, thus improving the rights of all individuals. Next slide. As you can see, these aren't abstract concepts. These are things that are applicable to all of us, to local communities. This is how the SDGs translate into real-world applications through GIS. And we can use geospatial data and GIS to measure things like potential energy, supply, chain efficiency. Various examples can be illustrated to show the value of the work that you do regularly. Or we can understand and address gaps in, for instance, connectivity to help identify vulnerable populations. As we know, many of us live in cities, and this will only increase. And GIS is critical to improving livelihoods and building communities that are strong, vibrant, and thriving, and enjoyable. The SDGs address the concerns of the GIS community. We all know that population pressures, water scarcity, soil erosion are elements that contribute to climate today. Whether global or local, the GIS community has been studying the human-environment relationship for at least half a century. And that's a testament of the great work that you all do. We know things are intrinsically linked. The SDG framework allows us to better understand these linkages, and develop solutions using technology. We integrate these relationships into our thinking around our solutions we provide to our users. And it's a collective effort that cannot work independently of you. What people are doing with GIS cuts across all of the SDGs, and this is an opportunity for the GIS community to advance the discipline, to foster even greater collaboration and partnerships, leveraging the SDG framework or blueprint, as some may refer to it as. But Esri continues to develop results based on partnerships with you all, and some examples to note are things like the Urban Observatory, where data is contributed by various nations, curated for comparability, or the Living Atlas, as was presented briefly by Clint, where maps and data layers from thousands of contributors are provided, or specific global spatial data sets such as the ecological land units, which include data on land cover, lithography, and more of the world. And lastly, and more recently with the Ocean Summit, at the United Nations, the ecological marine units containing millions of observations across the globe on key ocean characteristics. So there are many ways that geospatial data and spatial analysis can help us understand and measure our progress. Some indicators very clearly need GIS and geospatial analysis to be achieved, as shown here. Others may not specifically need spatial analysis, but in addition to using data to help inform decision making, some indicators can benefit simply from mapping and visualization to better understand the goals. Understanding where for any of these indicators is extremely powerful, some of the ones shown here. So if we go back to that framework and process that GIS provides, it really changes our perceptions of development. And some people in our space or outside may ask, why does GIS matter? Those who work with geographic information systems can focus their careers on figuring out how data can contribute to a broad range of scientific topics and studies, one of which is development. And GIS supports development in a variety of different careers and industries that rely on GIS, including those working in investment lending, grant management, program oversight, monitoring and evaluation, as well as project-level support activities such as engineering, management, logistics, telecommunications, and planning. Development practitioners can also use GIS to determine physical properties of a specific area and understand or predict patterns and data that the GIS can store, analyze, and visualize. In looking at development, professionals can look at previous program data that might include high and low costs for a specific date or time period in an area and within or across a project or a series of projects. From there, a professional can make assessments based on the patterns of the geographic area based on past observation. So this workflow that is illustrated here is the 6 patterns that we try to convey, and most, if not all of us, fall within or among these patterns. Specifically, ArcGIS is a complete WebGIS platform that facilitates this process. That means it uses web services as a system for managing and applying geographic information. This entire bundle of technology or system of technology is deployable on-premise or in the cloud or in some hybrid combination. It's fed by services, and these services can be accessed on anything, any device in web browsers, and also desktops can be enriched. This entire technology is designed to support individuals one at a time or to support a complete organization or organizations. It's beginning really to move, as Clint illustrated earlier, into communities of organizations and support that infrastructure as well. So looking through and stepping through these patterns, GIS is going out into the field. Michael Goodchild first introduced this idea to us maybe 20 years ago. We need to take GIS into the field. It's finally maturing so that the field is getting connected with the office so that the field people can easily collect data. At the same time, people in the office can be looking at the observations coming in. So an applied example of that is in Iraq, where this type of exercise was extremely valuable for field data collection. So recently in Baghdad, they introduced collection techniques using the technology for immunizations for polio, collecting the data, and at the same time at WHO, they were looking at it, analyzing it, understanding and adapting the surveys. Through data integration and management, the ArcGIS platform integrates data from all different types of systems. It provides a context through the system elements and associated data with their characteristics, abstracted as information layers. GIS is a platform for integration and flexible. We see this type of integration and management among our users, and we are iterating over solutions to support the Sustainable Development Goals. So, for example, curation, we can, through certain types of apps such as shown here, we can ensure that data is discoverable and used. And apps can enable quick data contributions to an organization's SDG initiatives, as this case presents the SDG contributor application, such as allowing you to nominate specific apps, maps, and scenes for inclusion in a hub or an organization, thus streamlining the data integration and management process. Of course, a lot of us understand analysis and modeling and its use in GIS. It has a significant history and is expanding at rapid speed. And GIS embeds advanced analytics and visualization naturally. This is nothing new to many of you. You all know it. Analytics, spatial analysis, and geoprocessing have been the heart and soul of GIS for a long time. But what's integrating in now is the ability to deal with very, very large data sets and do analytics to create insights and also new tools that allow us to explore and understand better these patterns and create insights faster at rapid speed. So this next visualization is using the platform to understand geospatial data, issues such as access to healthcare, addressing SDG 3. This app was built by AEHIN, Health Information Network in Asia, supported by the Asian Development Bank, and it's using a browser to invoke a geoprocessing operation, running as a web service on a server equipped with ArcGIS Server, using the cost surface and selected healthcare facilities, time polygons, isochrones, for those who are familiar, and generating generating and illustrate 30, 60, 90, and 120-minute travel zones toward the facilities. These travel zones are then intersected with a population distribution surface, and tables are produced summarizing the population served for each administrative boundary within each of the travel zones. So this type of application supports the monitoring and reporting of SDG 2 and 3 in certain ways in terms of access to healthcare, and can be shared widely to assist others in the monitoring and reporting on specific elements of SDG 2 or 3. And a lot of you have a lot of these solutions likely prepared to use and uptake and share, and we want to make that sharing community more vibrant among the SDGs. In terms of planning and decision making, dashboards are common to all of us. We at Esri have built easily configurable dashboards for a very long time that can pull in data sources from any system. And the SDGs provide perhaps the largest scope of data ever. So navigating your way through this information can be tricky. While we all know that dashboards are effective in their ability to quickly and intuitively convey insights for decision making, they must be able to link to a larger system rather than live in isolation. And this is the really exciting part, moving outwards towards this hub concept of connecting everyone. The data and services powering dashboards can come not only from ArcGIS, but from any provider that makes its services available in an open format. Sharing your work is extremely critical. We've seen a lot of input among the community on story maps. Many of you may be familiar with story maps. If not, this is an example of a story map around the SDGs. This is a story map journal template, and it really illustrates collaboration among various different organizations concerned with gender equality. This was built for International Women's Day, but it gives the reader a rich and engaging walk through the topics such as education, literacy, and participation in government as they relate to Goal 5, gender equality. And a lot of these stakeholder engagement applications are used for everything from communication to annual reports to regular reporting to crowdsourcing, which brings me to a project around the world's largest lesson to educate people on the Sustainable Development Goals, and really geared towards helping teachers build lesson plans. The world's largest lesson wanted to give a view into gender dynamics in leadership roles around them for people to understand these roles around them and the gender parity. So we supported the configuration of a story map template to help women and girls be motivated to see the gender balance around them. So working with our partners within the SDGs, we collaborated on a crowdsourced story map that allows for anyone to complete a survey and view a gender ratio representative of their community influencers and decision makers, both local and national. This has around easily 10,000 plus entries, and it's sparked a lot of conversation around gender parity, not just at the global level, but within local communities, and it's still contributing to those discussions and live now. More common stakeholder engagement elements, if you may, are APIs and open APIs, and we support development of many different APIs, one of which is the SDG metadata API, which we supported with the United Nations Statistics Division, that allows the sharing of authoritative goal, target, indicator metadata to a wide range of users and makes it easier to get data into the ArcGIS platform and do great things with GIS. One of the impetuses behind this is that we wanted our users to easily be able to ingest SDG metadata into their applications with little to no burden. So this API aims to be a building block for spurring SDG innovation. The hardest part, we all know, is action. So how do we incite action? We can get to a certain point, but what does the action look like? And we're a technology provider, so we don't have the ability to move people's hands per se. But for example, here you can look at things like crop production that shows, this is an app showing a specific area in Kenya, Kisumu County, crop statistics from the government of Kisumu in Kenya. This is real data. You can see on the top left that there's very little maize that's planted and overall crop production than most surrounding areas. One might want to dig further into this through creating an application or data collection activity, or even simply a community event directly from the SDG targets via a community or NGO initiative aimed at agricultural productivity. The SDGs provide an easy way to associate programs to them. So bridging these efforts together technologically through a system of systems approach is what's really happening now. No longer are we talking about siloed systems, new systems and platform development, but about mature systems that exist now to do this, to bring all of these applications together. So the work towards the SDGs is no different than what we're doing today. We need to lift our focus to the long term and wire the planet around this framework for collective action. And the SDG framework is forged into what our users, what you do every day, story maps, analytics, dashboards, open data. It's already in line with the data you collect, analyze, and derive understanding. So ArcGIS will help users like yourselves achieve their objectives and goals, and at the same time contribute to a larger body of work. So we're now going to show some of the examples and demo some of these patterns presented and the SDG applications for you to leverage in your work. We're going to now switch over quickly to Adam Pfister, who will go into some of those things.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So like Charles mentioned, and I should be showing you a screen now showing some of the goals and the icons with the map. Like Charles mentioned earlier, looking at taking a first view of the goals, there's a lot there, right? It's just the volume of data can be a little dizzying, to be honest, and that's sort of where I first started. So I needed some way to make sense of this to pivot around it, but of course I wanted to put that into a spatial context. And what we came up with initially to visualize this data at a global level is this dashboard view. So from this view, I can take a look at some examples that we've got set up, one around a global view for no poverty. So what I did is I just told the dashboard to show me target 1.1, which is by 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere. And in relation to that, show me the actual indicators for each, the indicators for target 1.1. You can see we've got a map view of the poverty gap there. We're also viewing that information as a chart, looking at the bottom 15 countries. So maybe this is where we can get a global view of how we're doing for target 1.1, and maybe start to ask questions about those bottom 15 countries and see, where can we direct our efforts a little bit more effectively to help out those nations if we need to. And then on the right, you're seeing a little animation of a story map preview, essentially, related to global poverty. So I can get information about that story map, see who published it. I could even click and launch that one right from the dashboard. And then I get a nice interactive message around global poverty if I want to learn more, understand more context around the SDG. So again, what did we do? Well, we looked at goal 1, and we looked at target 1.1. You can see this is a listing of all the targets for goal 1, and this app will let us sort of drill through each target all the way down to the indicator level. So here's a description of that indicator, and we can even look at the metadata behind it. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the SDGs and the data structure, each goal, 1 through 17, has a set of targets. How are we going to get to that goal? And each target has a set of indicators, which tells us how we measure each target and essentially how we track progress. And then the indicator metadata tells us how we calculate it, how we define it. What's the rationale behind this? Why are we actually doing this? How is the data available? And like I said, all of that information is extremely large and could be hard to sort of make sense of if you're just looking at it maybe in traditional forms like PDFs or other reports. But incorporating all this into an application lets us very quickly interact with the information and the data and visualize it to get a better understanding. So again, I switched to a global view, and we switched to goal 3 around good health. And we're looking at the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and some other diseases. So again, we see a map, some summary statistics. These are just the key indicators that we want to make sure that we're aware of, to make sure that these numbers are going down, and also another story map. But within the dashboard, I can switch from a global view to a country view. And we're staying on target 3.3, but we're visualizing those indicators a little bit differently. And since we switched to Thailand, we're looking at a sub-national view. I can interact with this map, and I now see summary statistics that are completely focused for Thailand. And again, I have some provincial information down at the bottom represented in the chart. So this information, this view of the data is a really good way to get people engaged, maybe at a first pass if they're not too familiar with the SDGs, showing them simple visualizations like this, some summary statistics, basically getting them introduced to why this matters and different ways that we can look at this information. And then these services, Charles showed you a diagram about how we sort of architect or take an approach to ArcGIS. One of the main components in that architecture is services, right? And we use open data services to power a lot of what you just saw in that dashboard application. So what we're looking at now is an open data site. This is something that I can just click a checkbox to enable, and then I can take those services from different organizations like WHO or other UN agencies or even governments or even private organizations that have exposed their data and bring them all into an open data site just by configuring an application like this. So I can search data. You can see I've got the tiles here again. If I click on Goal 5, I can get access to information in a web map, attributes. Maybe I want to look at maternal mortality. And instead of viewing it in a dashboard like I saw, this gives me a much more focused view of the data if I'm interested in the actual attributes about the data set itself. I can take a look at the table or view some charting information about the data. I can actually download it in different formats, spreadsheets or shapefiles. But one key thing to notice is I also have this option for using an API. So how I built that dashboard, I didn't download and extract all sorts of different information from thousands of different sites. Where available, I actually used open services to bring them into the dashboard. So that's real key, because as people make updates, as organizations make updates to different sites and different data sets, I don't have to go back there and make sure I'm paying attention. I'm just hooked into their live service URL, and it's bringing it directly into my application. And another thing I wanted to show you is an application around contributing to the SDGs. And the way that we do that is through an application like this that actually lets us take a look and see who is submitting information. So what I've done is I've logged in, and this is a different type of workflow. So I can see the groups that that I have access to. We can see we've got essentially a group for each goal. But as a reviewer, someone in a reviewing type role, I know that we have this data and services staging group. So if I click on that, I can see information that people have put into that group. So there's this global index item, and we can see that that item has been scored. It has a 53 out of 100, right? I can take a look and see that this is a new item. I'm going to review it. The title is okay. It's missing some thumbnails and a description. So what I can do is actually click this button to say send some notes to the person that submitted it, saying please add a description. And I can send that off. And then once that score comes up to something that's acceptable, I can change that to accepted. And then the reviewing process essentially can go to the next step. And maybe one of the next steps is that once I click on that button that says accepted, I can take that item, this service, this data, whatever it is, and behind the scenes put it into the open data site. So automatically it's been put into this QA application, been reviewed, scored, we've made some comments on it, and then behind the scenes it's actually been exposed to the public if that's part of our business process and rules. And then I wanted to touch on a few story maps that Charles referenced earlier. And again, if you're not familiar with story maps, I just have our homepage up here in front of us. And we've got a couple of featured story maps that you can look at, as well as some samples or templates for different ways you can design your story. Different templates that allow you to configure, bring in photos, go through a sort of a tour of photos that have geolocation associated with them. Swipe to show change over time. And one of the story map templates that we have is called a crowdsourcing template. And this right out of the box, you can actually configure this to let people put their voice on the map. And this is what we've done for this application. people want to be associated with an SDG, they want to show their commitments, so they can add their voice, choose to sign in if they like, add a photo, put their name and organization, and then pick which goal matters to them, enter a brief description, and then when they click on submit, it'll show up with everybody else's. So this is a fun and interactive way to get people excited and show people why you're committed to supporting one or more SDGs. But it's a configurable application. I didn't have to write any code. I just basically spun up the app, added a few things like a title, a logo, and then I went from there. And just to touch on, take that to the next step, Charles showed that gender equality story map. These are the way we get to that point, right, is we expose these templates on GitHub. So like I said, you can configure it however you like, but you can also come to our GitHub site and search for the story maps. And you can see each template has been listed there. You can download this and configure it and take it to the next step and build something like what we saw earlier, which is this. So I've added a custom header. I'm calculating based on all the data that's been entered into this gender survey, what is essentially the global average ratio. And I've changed it. I've added a few buttons. But essentially the idea is the same. I want to let people come in. I want to enable teachers across the world to teach this lesson to their class in a fun and interactive way. So we go through and we let them enter information about themselves, figure out a location, and in this case we've locked it down just to a city. We can't go any further down than that. And then we just let them start answering questions. And as we answer a question, the ratio is calculated dynamically on the fly for us. So rather than just filling this out on a form, which they could do as well, they can go all the way through this, submit it, and their ratio will then show up next to everyone else's in their area. And as they zoom out and pan around the map, they can get another idea of what the ratio is like in their area. So this was great and interactive for the public and teachers to get engaged around Goal 5. And we are very happy to work with Project Everyone and the World's Largest Lesson Initiative. And one of the ways that this can be enabled across sort of an initiative like this is to bring this same data, since it's being served out as a service, into an operations dashboard type view. And here we're seeing the exact same data, but what I've done is I've configured these widgets here along the side of the screen to show me some summary statistics about what we're looking at. And here we're almost at 11,000 entries, which is pretty remarkable. We can see entries from the last 3 days, along with a tiny dot map of just entries from where they're coming in all over the world. Again, we have that average ratio. We can see who's using the different social providers, if that makes sense, or if that's something of interest to us. And we're also just getting a summary by question. How are people answering? So this is a different view of that same data, which is really key, because now they have this information. The World's Largest Lesson staff can take this and they can look at their next initiative, right? Or they can do this initiative again next year and look at the change over time and see how maybe their initiative is having an impact in different areas. Switching gears a little bit, I'd like to talk about another configurable template, which I believe is just out of beta as of our most recent release, and it's called a live map template. And what this allows you to do is configure an application to search for different providers, so Twitter, Flickr. In this case, we're using a service called SICK, which I just learned this morning, actually lets you ping an area for people that are reporting different types of illnesses. So it's kind of like a weather report, but for people that are not feeling so great, right? So this is something that they've configured against this provider. And you can go in and look, and the map will adjust, see where this information is, but there was no code written for this. right? They just configured the application. So think about if we wanted to take this to have an SDG context, this is what that might look like. So here we're looking at goal 5, and we're searching through Twitter to find tweets that are geolocated. Now I've done a little customization to this. I've added this neat little spinning SDG logo. We can switch to goal 14 and maybe zoom in a little bit. I can add different keywords up here if I like to. But we're looking through Twitter to see who's talking about goal 14. This is something that you could very easily tie to a specific goal or a theme and then embed in your website with little to no code and have it up and running within a few minutes. And again, this is a template. I was able to add this little logo because we have this template available on GitHub. So it's something you can configure and do little to no customization to, or you can take it the next step using the template that we provide. And then finally, I just wanted to end by talking about something that we call Insights, which is coming into its version 2.0 release, which is moving very quickly and adding some very powerful features to exploratory data analysis. And what I've done is I've made a real simple dashboard to get you thinking about what you might be able to do with this type of product as it relates to the SDGs. And I've added in some spatial data sets. This is the same data set that we were looking at in the dashboard. It's running the same services. But what I did is I brought in some information around the prevalence of undernourishment and the proportion of overweight children. So this is something that you may want to look at in conjunction with each other on the same map to see if there are any trends that you may notice, some things that are going on that we were aware of and that so we can verify, or maybe some trends that we weren't expecting to see. This Insights allows you to drag and drop information and create data very quickly and gain that insight. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I did that. I'm going to add some data to a page, and essentially it works like having a workbook similar to Microsoft Excel. I'm going to add some data to my workbook, a page on my workbook, and it's going to map that for me. Right away it knows that there's spatial data associated with this. If it didn't, of course I could go in and enable location. So if there's just address information in my data set, I can go through and actually geocode and place that data on the map all within this application. I can choose to style this information by a particular attribute in my data. I can do it a couple different ways, by counts and amounts. So it shows up just as symbolized points within to represent the country. I can classify that data all within the application here. And of course, I can change the colors and normalize it by different fields too if I'd like to do that. But we'll leave it just as a shaded color ramp. And then if I wanted to take a look at information over the years, I can choose, these are the columns in my data. It scans my data set and it knows that there's a date column in there, so it's going to parse that out if I wanted to look at data by different time intervals, such as day of the week or month. I could do that too, but I'll take the year, the country code, and our value, drag it over and create a chart. We'll put that down here. And now we can see that data over time. And as I mouse over, it gives me information about that particular data set and where things are trending. I can also take that data, just the 3-digit code and the value, and create another chart showing me the same information, maybe as a tree map. I can see the different countries that show up, things that maybe I was aware of that I didn't see before. And as I interact with each card on the page, the data sets will reflect in the different cards as well. Here we've got another example showing a bubble chart. And when I interact with the bubble chart, I can see the country being highlighted on the left-hand side there too. So Insights is a very powerful tool for data exploration. You can get all the way down to the country level. Whatever data you have available at different geographic levels, you can pull into Insights. So here we're looking at that same crop data that Charles showed earlier by county within Kenya. And all we had to do is add that data to our map from existing services, from an Excel workbook, from a CSV file, etc. And we can start to share this information. We can actually look at the different steps that we used to go through and create this workbook and share that out with different people. So different people within our organizations, we can give that to them. They can put in their own data sets and rerun the analysis and compare that. So we can cut down the time that it takes to get to these different steps and bring that and share that into a collaborative environment. And finally, what I wanted to show is related to the SDGs. Of course, we're working with a group within the United Nations to build an API. And the API is an open API that will retrieve information around the goals. And we can get at that information if you're a developer by asking it very simply using this URL structure to show me all of the information for goal 1, or show me all the indicators that relate to target 1.1, etc. And you can pivot around that in a lot of different ways and return all the data all the way down to the metadata level. You can filter the information, and essentially we take this, we are putting this out as a building block. We want people to build innovative applications using this API. We want people to take inspiration from a dashboard like this, which is what I used in conjunction with some services and that metadata API, and draw new ways to show this information and get people engaged with the Sustainable Development Goals. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Brendan.
Yeah, well, I'll take over control of the presentation, and we have a few more slides to wrap up that Charles will be speaking to. Is everyone able to see my slide deck now?
I see it, Brendan. Looks good.
Okay, great.
Well, for those of you that are still hanging on, we have a special treat for you at the end, so stick around. We're getting towards the end, and I just want to share that and thank everybody. I mean, the big picture here is that GIS is collaborative by nature. All of us have collaborated around GIS information for most of, if not all of our careers. It's really about connecting everyone and creating a system of engagement to engage everybody in a collective manner to achieve a specific goal, whether that be a spatial data set on roads, rivers, or otherwise, but also connecting people and their organizations. And that's really where we're moving to. And Clint illustrated that early on. So providing context so that we understand as communities what's going on, and GIS and maps are the common language that brings us together to do that. Maps help us communicate, they help us understand, and they will help us act. So we're all familiar with this previous slide, but the notion of breaking down barriers and getting individuals in different pockets to share and collaborate around common information is always a challenge. And that's what many of you, through your collaborative nature of the application of GIS and geography, you can help your organizations do this, and you do naturally. And we as all of us need to educate other people on the collaborative network that GIS provides through shared services, a system of sustainable development that can connect all of our organizations together. So we can start to collaborate and share and take GIS to a whole new level, sharing data between big agency to big agency, collaborating and sharing your services so that organizations can read in. Organizations are sharing their services that you can use, empowering everyone. So with that, we are starting to work towards a vision that takes all of that into consideration and utilizes all of these shared services. So So this sharing of services becomes critical, and so does that shared environment that we sometimes term open data. So we share services. So now what? So this is where it really gets exciting, and we're starting to talk more about connecting through what we're terming as a hub technology that builds on top of where we are with open data right now. And this really aims to help answer the questions that open data reveals. This key piece of engagement must be part of a contemporary GIS today, and we're building it with our users, with input from the community. So how do we use data in effective ways to become more efficient, more innovative, and responsive? How do we do this across departments and agencies to improve processes and inform citizens, as well as be transparent and engaging, to bridge all of these groups together that you see here? Once we bridge that information together, we can provide that information from those organizations or agencies to the public. Through that, we can engage the public, NGOs, journalists, citizens, startups, and then get to that piece of action to allow for the completeness of the feedback loop that starts with opening our data. And what does that look like? How are we moving towards that? Well, what's going to be really exciting at the UC, if any of you are coming, and for those that are not, we're going to be sharing a lot of this content after, but with the SDGs, this is a requirement. We need to bring information together. The SDG provides that process and framework for a better future. So how do we operationalize that? While the SDGs don't address all of our concerns, they're a starting point for us to better understand our world and address current and future challenges. So they're a blueprint for a better future, and GIS underpins all of the goals to the geography and the science of where, the applications of geographic science using GIS technology. So I'm going to leave you with a sneak peek of some of the great work by the Government of Ireland, which will be further detailed at the UC. But this integrates all of the data, applications, open data, analysis tools, stories, narratives around the SDGs into what's going to be pushed out as a hub, and that hub will be displayed by some of the Ireland attendees at the user conference. I will end there because I think going into the hub specifically would best be suited for the Government of Ireland and its colleagues to share at the UC, and I want to leave you with that hanging point to follow up on. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it back to Brendan now.
All right, thanks again to Clint and Adam and Charles. That was all great stuff. And remember, this is just the second installment in our webinar series. We have the initial one that Alan Carroll and I did with story maps. You can find that at the webinar series website, which is listed at the bottom of the screen. Just wanted to alert everyone that coming up in the fall, we'll be having 3 more installments into our webinar series. Our first one after the summer break will be on planning and prioritizing sustainable development investments and activities. We'll dig a little deeper into specific workflows, GIS workflows that can support those planning and prioritizing efforts, and we'll have special guest stars there from some of the agencies that we're working with. They'll be showcasing some of the great work they're doing. Similarly, we'll have those for the following 2 webinars in the webinar series. The 4th installment, monitoring and evaluation for sustainable development programs, in October. And then lastly, we'll be building on some of the great work that Adam showed here and engaging stakeholders and beneficiaries in November. So with that, we have a little bit of time left, about 15 minutes. I thought that we could open it up to some questions. So first off, one of the questions that we got asked is, is there recording and will it be available? I can field that one. The answer is yes. Because of our technical difficulties, we kind of started the recording a little bit late. But I think the meat of the presentation there from Clint and Charles and Adam, that will be available up on the webinar's website, which again is in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen there. We had a few other questions here. So we saw some of the technology that Adam demonstrated, and then Charles, you kind of left us with that little cliffhanger with the Ireland efforts for the hub. And one of our questions is, who else has Esri been partnering with for these SDGs efforts? And what are the main ways that we're being engaged with the Sustainable Development Goals? So I think that might be most appropriate for Charles. If maybe you could address that. Who are we partnering with, and what are we doing to support these? It might be a little bit of a summary of what we covered in today's presentation.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned earlier, we're not doing anything as GIS users differently. It's really through our regular currently existing engagements that we're engaging the community of the Sustainable Development Goals. So what I mean by that is member states use our technology. UN member states have been using our technology for a significant amount of time, and they need tools to better enable the collection and monitoring and reporting on the SDGs. So it's really just enabling our existing users. So for example, given countries use our technology within the statistics offices, and all those statistics offices that within a given country use geospatial data regularly. Many use our technology to support their own work, whether it be the SDGs or otherwise. So we're trying to provide solutions that are easy for them to utilize, that help them monitor and report on the SDGs and strengthen their existing systems for things like census and surveys. But going to a more regional or international context, we also have supported the United Nations system for many decades, and one specific area of focus that we've been targeting in on to help support is just going beyond our regular building of tools to support the SDGs, but to enable connected hubs of information among UN agencies and member states to better report and basically use more contemporary tools. So we've been working with the United Nations Statistics Division, different UN entities on like UNEP and others to understand their spatial data and GIS needs and start to bring and help them build tools to better monitor and report on the SDGs. So I hope that gets to some of that answer, Brendan.
Yeah, it does. It seems like, as you mentioned, GIS is something that people that are going to be working towards these SDGs are already doing. I think that kind of collaboration piece is key, kind of pushing them to open up their data and tools so that people can leverage other people's efforts so that we can all kind of work in unison towards these goals. So yeah, that was a good summary. We had another question. It seems that some of our attendees will be attending the Esri User Conference in about 2 weeks' time. And we're just wondering about some of the activities or learning opportunities that might be there that are either aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals or sustainable development in general. And maybe that could be another one for Charles, and maybe Adam, if you could pipe in as well. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, so our user conference is coming up July 10th, and we're going to have the Sustainable World Showcase, where there's a lot of really innovative things going on around sustainable development and the SDGs specifically. Like I mentioned previously, Ireland's doing some really great work, but it's not exclusive to Ireland. I think there's a handful of countries that are going to be sharing their experiences, as well as UN agencies, more targeted SDG efforts. I'm not sure how much to reveal here, but I would urge you to go to Esri.com and look at and find in the agenda the Sustainable World Showcase flyer. Maybe we can post that, Brendan, because that might be the most valuable for those attending to kind of see the whole picture of what's going to be presented and who's going to be there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. There have been several questions about contact and follow-up. Just to reiterate, the recording will be available through the webinar website, and we'll also be sending up a follow-up email where we can include things like the sustainable or the Sustainable World community flyer that kind of lists out all the different activities. So we can follow up with that after the webinar. As far as contacts, we did have a question about how the community that's attending this webinar can contact both the presenters and other members of the team at Esri that are working on these efforts. I didn't include it in this slide, but it's a pretty easy email address to remember. It's simply sdgs@esri.com. So that's the email alias. So if you have any questions about the Sustainable Development Goals and Esri's efforts and tools that can contribute to them, you can reach us at sdgs@esri.com, and we'll be sure to get back with you in a timely manner. Let's see here. Any other questions? We had some specific questions, maybe for Adam. You showed some pretty interesting tools there, and you did a little bit of customization for some of the open source templates. Someone was asking, is there an easy way to get started to kind of set up an environment to maybe experiment with some of the templates or APIs, or how might someone go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can just go to arcgis.com, and there's an ability to create a free trial account, which will then give you access to the templates and some of the apps that you saw. And then if you wanted to get more involved, I'd encourage you to check out some of the GitHub sites, the links for the SDGs that we have, and investigate there, and feel free to reach out to us via that email alias as well.
Great. Yeah, and in our follow-up, we can pay some resources to some of those in our follow-up. Kind of a related question for a specific application template, the crowdsourced story map that you showed. Someone was asking, and I think we've discussed this before, whether there's a way to disable the photos there, or is that something that you might be able to do with a custom code?
Yeah, you'll need to
story map template.
Right, yeah. So that is something that is required in the out-of-the-box configuration. But if you want to disable that, you'll need to download that and adjust a little bit of code for that. Okay, great.
So there were a few other questions about like Twitter accounts and things like that. We do have a Twitter handle at Esri_nonprofit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Raquel, that's the Twitter handle. A lot of our SDG related activities will be tweeted out through that handle. I'm not sure about the other handles there. Mine is at geo_Neil. And we can incorporate all this into a follow-up email. We probably should have had it on a slide, but we can do that in the follow-up email just so you're aware of not just the events and activities, but also we like to promote all the work of our user community that's doing that's really addressing these targets and indicators. So that's a good channel to follow to kind of keep in the loop for some of those things, events, and also just great examples of work out there. All right, so we do have a couple more specific questions, but it might be best for us to follow up with those on individual basis, seeing as we're a bit over time right now. Unless there's anything else from any of our panelists, I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in. This has been a great event, and thanks for bearing with us with the technical difficulties at the beginning. Again, the webinar it has been recorded, and it will be posted up on the SDG webinar series webpage. So thanks for tuning in, and be sure to join us in September for our next webinar on planning and prioritizing activities. Thanks.